Okay, I thought I'd start with a little story, just to warm us up. I was going to start about how nervous I am talking after Satchidanaya. That's the last week. He was getting a lot of positive praise. Okay, so a while ago I was in charge, or rather I was a kind of client of the London Buddhist Centre working with a building project. So a few years ago we did building work on every floor of this building, created a new space downstairs, created that new space we came into. And I ended up sort of managing it from the Buddhist Centre's point of view. That's why I'm prematurely grey. I was gorgeous before that. It's hard to believe. I ended up managing it. It's very, very stressful. If you've ever managed building or tried to manage building somewhere, it's very, very stressful. And we were doing building work in the communities. And you know what it's like having building work in your flat. It also creates a lot of bad feeling. Somebody particularly in one of the communities was finding it very, very difficult and getting really quite aggressive, particularly with me. And partly because I made mistakes, partly I forget things and so on. And we did one of those email exchanges where there's more and more exclamation marks and so on. And I went to talk to him, and he was really quite aggressive. And I was angry myself. I didn't express it, but I was angry myself. And I was under a lot of pressure. And I thought he was being unfair, all the usual things. And then that night I was going off to see a concert. I'd booked it ages before, a Mala concert. I'm a very big fan of Mala. I hope other people are. I'm a big fan of Mala. So I'd booked this concert ages before. And I left this very difficult communication with him where I was trying to work with him, if you see what I mean. Very frustrating communication. And I left to go to this concert. And of course I was in a rage internally. And one can go through all the list of things. And what was happening, as I'm sure we've all had, is I was going through that argument in my head again and again. He said that, and next time I should have said, damn, I should have said that. And that's outrageous, by the time I got to Liverpool Street Station and got off, my temperature, my emotional temperature was rising and rising, It's very difficult, those states of mind, aren't they? They're so easy to get into. They start, even without this difficult conversation, they can start innocently enough, can't they? Your just mind goes, yes, they said that, and and before I can't bear that, before you're sort of straggling them, but just in your mind, but you can drift into them, can't you, without noticing it. Anyway, I would, without quite being aware of it, I was going through it more and more in my mind like that, in this sort of argument. Interestingly, what happens when you do that is that your body experiences everything as if it was happening. So you tense up, your belly tenses up, your blood pressure goes up, your eyes dilate so that you can act. Your body basically doesn't tell the difference between an argument in your head and an argument that's actually happening. So when we go through things like that, we're actually doing it again and again. As far as our physiology is concerned, we're having that argument again and again and again. And no wonder that we then get exhausted, no wonder we then feel life is not going anywhere, because we are actually effectively having an argument again and again and again. One that person may never know that we're having. Sometimes we can get into a completely bad mood with an argument that never happens, that has never happened and will never happen, but we can construct it, can't we, in our head. In a way, it's a very good lesson about the nature of our mind, that our mind is both wonderful and dangerous. It's both the place where everything remarkable can happen, and it's a place from which we can destroy our life, just by a thought, just by a little thought. You think something, I can't, before you know it, you're in a rage. When you think of it, for instance, the last century was a century destroyed by people's ideas. Just little ideas people had in their mind became behaviours, became actions which destroyed millions of people. Just an idea, just a thought. Some of it, just a thought in one individual's mind, can create mayhem. One of the things we're trying to realise on this course is the power of our thought. Not in a spooky, pseudo-spiritual way, but in the way that our thought creates habits, habits create actions, actions create ourselves. Yeah. So there I was in this argument. It wasn't really an argument, I was just walking to a concert. But if you were to look at my physiology, I was having a full-out argument about this whole building project on the back of, long days of work, working in something that for me that really wasn't congenial. I don't know anything about buildings. It's very uncongenial for me, so that makes it more stressful. And as I was walking there, it was like a moment of revelation. I thought, Maitreyabandhu, this is the moment. This is the moment. This is it. This is the moment when you need to practice the Dharma. This is what the Buddha is trying to talk about, is this moment. Yeah? Probably you've already had this experience where, yes, you can see all that the things that we're saying make sense, but not now, not this moment. I'm too busy just now, or this is happening just now. Of course I can't get round to it just now. But the Buddha is always trying to talk to us about what your mind is doing now, and is it doing the sort of things you want it to do. Usually we just sort of fall into the moment and get lost in it. There's this terrible habit to believe that Buddhism is about being in the moment. It's not about that at all. That's just, I don't know where it's come from, it's not a Buddhist teaching. If anything, we need to get out of the moment. Because very often what we're doing is we're making huge generalizations based on the moment. Or we're stuck in a moment like we're having an argument in our head. We're not trying to be in that moment. Do you see what I mean? That's absurd. We're trying to get out of that moment. We're trying to see that moment is the moment to practice. That's what we're trying to see. Very often what we do is we make illegitimate overgeneralizations from the moment. So when we're feeling down, we overgeneralize from that. We illegitimately overgeneralize from that and think we're always going to be feeling down. When we're feeling up, we think we can achieve anything. We illegitimately overgeneralize from that. Do you see what I mean? So in some ways, I'm being slightly provocative, but in some ways we need to get out of the moment, not be in the moment. The moment is a dangerous place, and our task in life is to relate to the moment in a way that actually is fruitful. But what happens is that we often don't even notice what's going on. So very often we're having that argument in our head, and our body is doing all those things that are telling us we're in an argument, and yet we don't really notice it. That's why mindfulness of citta is so important. That's why mindfulness of Vedana is so important. That's why mindfulness of the body is so important, is to get to this moment where we notice what's actually happening. So whether you're doing the breathing space, whether you're doing the mindful walk or whatever, what you're trying to do, what I am trying to do, is notice the moment that's happening and what am I going to do with this moment. So instead of being in that argument in our head, with that unconsciously, we're trying to actually rear up to that moment and act in a way that's fruitful. Yeah? I was literally, I can even almost tell you exactly where I was on the pavement. I was just about to walk past this pub where there were all these people standing outside. And it was like I sort of gave myself a good talking to. I sort of took myself by my shirt collar and just said, this is the moment. And even then I started thinking, I could write about this in my book. They said, no, this is not the moment to write about in your book. This is actually the moment to practice, to actually do something. And I could really feel how I wanted to continue in that argument in my mind, even though it was painful, even though it was unfruitful. It's like being halfway through a song. You want to continue the song. Or watching rubbishy television. You want to find out what happens at the end of the story. Even though you know full well what's going to happen at the end of the story, the affair will be discovered. That's what always happens at the end of the story. There's no affair that isn't. That's the whole point. You know what I mean? Even though you know that, you thought, I must watch it. And then, of course, if it's a soap opera, you need to stay until next week to find out when the affair gets discovered. So our mind is like that. We're in the middle of the story and we feel compelled to continue telling it, even if it's utterly unhelpful, even if we know it's not taking our lives anywhere. We somehow want to continue it. Yeah? So in this moment, I somehow managed to think, no Maitreyabandhu, do you really want to spoil the evening doing this? You're about to go off to see a concert which you booked ages ago because you really wanted to listen to this music. Do you really want to spend the whole evening doing this thing in your mind? It's not going to get you anywhere. Is that what you intend to do? Do you see what I mean? Do you really want to? You can do that if you want to, but do you really want to do that? Do you really want to do that? Remember, you booked this concert. Do you really want to do that? Usually we don't get to that question in our mind, do we? We just are blown around by our habits. Whether it's getting angry, whether it's feeling low, whether it's feeling sorry for ourselves, whether it's thinking, I'm too sexy for my shirt, whatever way we do ourselves, we often just sort of dream it without noticing. We don't often say, do you really want to do this? Is this what you wanted your life to be like? To be just going around arguments fruitlessly in your head, point scoring in your head. When you were a child, did you look forward to doing this? Did you think that this was adulthood? I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just point score in my mind, or I'll collect grievances. That would be a good thing to do when I'm older. I'll just go one, well, that was a grievance. I was overlooked, and so forth. You know what I mean. And somehow I managed to really see that in that moment and really think, this is getting me nowhere. This attitude now is getting me nowhere. I must get out of it. I don't want to be in it. I need to do something else. And somehow in that moment I got out of that mental state. I don't know whether anyone saw that not very good Spider-Man film, the second one or the third one, where he gets kind of enveloped in this nasty suit. He's a nice Spider-Man, but he gets enveloped in this nasty suit, the one, which sort of grows around him, and he starts behaving badly. Actually, not very believably in the film. He starts behaving badly. And at a point, he just pulls it off. And that's what mental states are like. They engulf us. It's not that we have them, they have us. We're possessed for a time. And sometimes it's really striking when you get very anxious afterwards, when everything's been all right. You wonder what possessed you. Why did I allow myself to run with that so much? Why did I believe it so much? Yeah? You get possessed. Yeah? But often we don't notice the possession. So mindfulness of citta is noticing the possession. In a poem by Marianne Moore, she says, the mind is an enchanting thing, an enchanted thing. So what she means is that the mind both enchants things and is in itself enchanted. We're enchanted by things, and I mean that negatively. We're enchanted by the argument we're trying to win. Yeah? And what happened is, because I got into it, because I thought this isn't not going to work, this is not what I want. Hatred never overcomes hatred. This is what the history of the world has been like. It's been one hatred for another hatred. It happens globally and it happens individually. It doesn't work. That's what I'm trying to learn. That's what the Buddha teaches me. Because I could see that, directly see it, this Maitreyabandhu is your own ill will. Just because you've got somebody else in your mind that you're arguing with, don't be let off the hook that this is your own ill will. This is your own aversion. This is your own hatred, and that will never work. It will never help. Because I really saw that, I was released from it. And then I had this evening of bliss. I don't often have evenings of bliss. Really odd evening. It was such an evening of bliss. So I got to the concert feeling really happy. And I sat there waiting for the concert to start, and I thought, that's very strange. I met a friend there, and I thought, that's very strange, because I'd been the night before, And it was all set up exactly like it was the night before. And I looked at the programme, I thought it was even stranger because it says exactly the same thing it was yesterday. And I booked for the same concert twice. And so it was about to start, and I thought, this is actually the same concert. I went to it last night. I booked it twice, I thought it was another one. Normally I'd be very critical with myself because I'd written a book called Life with Full Attention. All of my friends are very quick to remind me of that. And so a friend and I, we got up, and I thought, oh, well, never mind. So I got down to and there were two people the last people in a queue to buy tickets, and there was no tickets left, and they were really keen to see it. So I said, you just take these. And they were like so delighted to get in. It was like a gift to give it to them. I just said, you go. And they were so pleased. So because they were so pleased, I was so pleased. I just sort of given them something. And then I was there with a friend, and he was a bit cross with me, but I just found the whole thing delightfully funny. I was just like in bliss. Anything could happen. I was quite happy for anything to happen. And one time I mislaid my coat, and then I realised I hadn't brought my coat. It's like this, comedy. It was a comedy of errors, a comedy of unmindfulness. But none of it mattered. Everything was kind of delightful. Everything was just what it was. Without my mind turning it into stories, everything was just a kind of play. And you could constantly interact with that play and get it to play better. So I could get up, go downstairs and give someone my ticket and create more joy in the world. Just like that. Easy. And because I created a little bit more joy in the world, I experienced more joy myself. My friend was a bit frustrated with me, understandably, because I've written a book called Life Full Attention. But I didn't react to that. I didn't get defensive. I just sort of laughed about it in absurd. So then I really just enjoyed not being defensive. Then because I wasn't defensive, he could let go of it. And so the world changes. Literally, the world changes. That's all you need to do. And this is the most important thing that we're saying on the whole course. The world changes if you get into the moment by mindfulness of body, mindfulness of Vedana, mindfulness of Chitta, and actually act in accordance with what you already know is in your own best interests. Yeah? You already know, folks. You don't really need Satidasa and I to tell you. You already know that going through an argument in your head is not a good use of an evening, don't you? You don't need me to tell you. You already know that feeling sorry for yourself doesn't actually create a good outcome. You already know that agonising over a painful childhood doesn't change that childhood, etc., etc. You already actually know how to make your life more fulfilling. You know it, and I know it. All I'm doing is reminding you that that's what we mean to do. That when we were children, we looked forward to a grown-up, fulfilled life, not a life in which we scored points, felt aggrieved, showed off, and so on and so forth. The real issue is getting into the moment and bringing what we call the Dharma to bear onto that. And this is what is meant by mindfulness of Dharmas. But in a way that sounds a bit, it's very traditional language, it sounds a bit like it's not something that you do, it sounds technical. All it means is bring to mind what you know to be in your own best interests. But bringing that to mind in the moment that you need it, in the moment that it's actually happening. In other words, you bring the Dharma. Dharma just means teaching to bear on the moment that needs that Dharma. So when you're going through an argument in your head, you bring to mind that hatred never overcomes hatred. That this behaviour that I'm kind of addicted to, really, we all are addicted to, will never solve anything. All it does is causes me suffering, and I know that because I'm suffering right now. Yeah? And I feel strangely compelled to carry that on. Or perhaps you go somewhere, as I went somewhere yesterday, and you can think, why am I here? I shouldn't have come here. This wasn't a good idea. But actually, tell you what, you're there now. So Instead of thinking, oh, why have I come? Oh, why have I did it? I always do this. I always book to do things and I don't really mean to. I shouldn't have come. Actually, how can I be here then? Have you ever done that? Or you go somewhere and you think, or you're watching a film and you think, why? I knew I shouldn't have come to this. This is ridiculous. Why not? It's a waste of time, isn't it? Yeah. So what mindfulness of Dharmas is bringing to bear everything we've learned so far of mindfulness of body and Vedana and Chitta. We're doing that really just to notice what's going on in my mind just now. What is it? Is it what I really want? Is it what I really know to be fruitful? If it's not, how can I change it now? Really, really easy to do. Someone was telling me the other day on the course that another partner that's always late, their partner tends to be late, and she saw him hurrying down the street. And the tendency is to say, I can't believe it, you know, all that, which just creates lots of even more bad feeling. They already feel guilty. And what she said was, thanks for hurrying. Thanks for hurrying. Yeah? And he said, sorry to be late. And both people in that scenario actually mean it. Do you see what I mean? That's immediately, isn't it, a different world. You could say, I can't believe it. I can't, why? You could then you start to use words like always, can't do that, you do that whole thing. All that does is create more suffering for them and more suffering from you. Whereas you can say, thanks for hurrying. Yeah? Or if your partner says, what would you like, do you eat chicken? And you think, I can't believe it. They know full well I don't eat chicken. I can't believe it, They don't imagine me, they obviously don't care for me. Now they're asking me whether I want chicken or not. They know full well I'm a vegetarian. And you could do that, or you could just say, no, I don't eat chicken now. You probably forgot. Oh yeah, sorry. There you go, a changed world, yeah? It's not difficult, folks. You know it makes sense, as they say in the adverts. I know it makes sense. What's difficult is to remember to be mindful. That's what's difficult. When we're in those states of mind, they're a kind of vortex, aren't they? Particularly negative states of mind. Positive states of mind are much more flexible. Negative states of mind are like lobster pots. They're easy to get into and difficult to get out of. The more you get into negative states of mind, the more committed you are to that negative state of mind. The more you kind of want to run it. You can even sometimes get out of it and think, hang on, something was going on. Oh, I remember, I was in a bad mood. And you sort of go back to it. So mindfulness of Dharmas is really about noticing the mind state you're in from the perspective of what you know to be in your own best interests. What you know to be in your own best interests. And trying to notice the state of mind you're in, really feel that, and act in your own best interest. But you see how you need the both. If you try to become mindful of dharmas without enough mindfulness of chitta, your state of mind, you'll just do worthwhile things without really noticing what the issue is. So you'll be being generous, perhaps, without really noticing, actually, I don't feel generous. Yeah. So mindfulness of chittas is taking really 100% responsibility for the state of mind you're in just now. Bored, anxious, intoxicated, forgetful, happy, joyful, whatever it is, knowing that you're in that state of mind. That's what mindfulness of chitta is. The Buddha would say, when I'm experiencing chitta, I know I'm experiencing chitta. And then mindfulness of dharmas is bring to mind, what do I need to do in this state of mind? Yeah? So if I'm in a positive state of mind, how do I let that positive state of mind continue? What's created this positive state of mind? And how do I support that positive state of mind in continuing? It's often very little things like, oh, I've been actually getting to bed on time. I've not been staying up really late watching YouTube videos or whatever. So my positive state of mind is partly to do with that. So I need to remember to do that. See how much happier I am. It's weird, isn't it, with positive states of mind, that when you're in them again, you think, I must remember that this is actually better. Positive state of mind, they're positive because they're like kind of better. When you're in them, life feels kind of better. Yeah, it's just that when you're not in them, you can't remember what the hoo-ha was about, what this positive state and whatever was about. You see what I mean? But the reason they're called positive is because they're kind of better. And when you're in them, you feel that life is better. Yeah, that's all it is. But when you're not in them, you can't remember what they were. You sort of forget that being happy, being fulfilled, being kind, being courageous, being honest was just kind of better. Yeah? You don't need a metaphysics for that. You can if you want to, but you don't really need one. You just need to remember that when you feel fulfilled and happy, you're kind of in a better place. Yeah? Negative states of mind have this kind of vortex thing where they get addictive very quickly. Not only are we in them, we're sort of committed to them, even committed to repeating them, even though we know that that is not in our own best interest. So they need a kind of willingness to grasp the moment and act in accordance with what we know is best. Yeah. So I want to say two more things about it, none of which are in my notes. Anyway, it's all in the book. There's a question. The two great issues we need to work with are when we're in a state of hankering and wanting, and when we're in a state of aversion. There's lots of other things, but really those are the two great matters. And we need to particularly try to notice those things. So we know we're in a state of hankering because we want to repeat something. We know when something's pleasant because we immediately want to repeat it. And as I said 2 weeks ago, that desire to repeat pleasure vitiates pleasure that we experience. We get less and less pleasure. The more pleasure you try and cram into your weekend, the less pleasure you experience. As soon as you try and grab onto a pleasure, the less pleasure you experience. Actually, there's a deeper element to that, is that when we hook onto a pleasure, what we do is we edit it instinctively. So we edit it sunny side up. Yeah. So, for instance, one of the things that I hook onto, and I hope this won't be too shocking, is I like cafes. Sorry, I know it was going to be a shock. I like cafes. I got this kind of ideal cafe moment where, I got the nice cakey thing, a nice, really good coffee. Here's my moment. Yeah. But it never quite works. So I found a really good cafe recently, very near here. Really, probably the best cafe I've been to for ages. Really nice cakey thing. Really nice coffee. I hope this isn't too shocking. Really nice coffee. But it was a very, very bad acoustic, so it was very noisy. Also, I was with somebody that I wanted to talk to. So there's that moment, I want to engage with them, but I actually really want to give all of my attention, life full attention, to my coffee and cake. So you could think, okay, well, next time I'll come and I'll just come on my own, so I can have the coffee and cake and just really experience that. But then you feel kind of slightly awkward. When you're eating on your own, you end up looking up all the time because you feel slightly insecure. So that doesn't quite work either. Do you see what I mean? So even with something as simple as that, when we hook onto that idea of, and then I'm going to go to a cafe and have that lovely free-timey kind of spacey thing, we edit it sunny side up. We cut out all the negative aspects of that, and that means that we can actually believe that experience is really going to deliver what we want. But that's an editing job. And life never fits that editing. Very rarely happens. Life just doesn't work in that way. Similarly, when we dislike something or someone, particularly important with someone, is we edit them sunny side down, don't we? So when we don't like somebody at the office, we start to attach to all of the things that we don't like about them and actually embellish them in our mind. So much so that we almost want them to do that thing that makes us angry. So here they come. Here they go. I bet they're going to say that thing. And they say, I thought this. We're sort of committed to a negative vision of them. Do you see what I mean? We edit them. So anything that is likable about them or that doesn't fit our negative story, we just kind of edit out. So sometimes it's quite shocking to discover they have friends. Because as far as you're concerned, it's just not possible. Yeah? And that's just because of your editing. Yeah? That's what we do. So what we could try and do this week is start to notice our instinctive editing. How we, when you have a pleasant experience, when you're looking forward to a pleasant experience, what are you editing out of that? So start to think about a pleasant experience you're going to have this week. It might be a cafe moment, it might be sex, it might be whatever it is. What are you actually hooking on to? And what are you not willing to bring into that picture because you know it complicates it? If there's an unpleasant experience that you've got, what are you editing there? What negative thing are you bringing forward? And what more positive thing are you pushing back? How are you manipulating your life, in other words? Yeah? So we could start to reflect on something that's going on in our life like that. And what I want to suggest that we do this week is come up with, let's say, 2 precepts. Even if you don't do anything else this week, come up with 2 precepts, 2 things that you could actually do to help your life be fruitful, fulfilling, rather than unfruitful and unfulfilling. I'm trying to drop the language of happiness, by the way, because I think that's confusing. You can't always be happy. It's not always possible to be happy. I don't seem to have a talent for happiness. Some people do, some people don't. But you can live in a way that's more effective and more fruitful, can't you? You can always do that. You can live in such a way that your time is spent in a fruitful, effective, fulfilling way. You can't necessarily decide to be happy, quite. I think that's sometimes a bit confusing. So what could you do this week to make your life, to act in a way, to bring dharmas to mind that makes your life more filling? So the person earlier on saying her partner always likes to be late, that's a gorgeous example, isn't it? There you are, you're sitting, you're starting, where are you? I can't remember. Yes, you're starting to sit there, you know, there's your habit. I'd like sitting there in a coat getting self-righteous, really, is, you know, I'm the right person, this is the wrong person. I can't believe it, they're getting into a shower, you know. Or you could just think, okay, I'm getting to that state, so what I'm going to do is say, I need to get there on time, so I'm going to just go there now, I'll meet you down there. Much better, isn't it? What you got there immediately was a changed world. That option is always open to us. What you need to do, though, is noticing, I actually don't need to sit here in a grump. I could actually go. And I could do that with good grace. I don't need to do it in a bad mood. I just say, look, actually, for me, it's important to get there on time. I really like the way you said it. For me, it's important to get there on time. For other people, they're not so bothered by that. So, okay, you get to do that bit, and I get to do the on time bit, and you'll meet me later. Much better, yeah? So try to see if you can, in a minute, talk in a small group. Perhaps we'll just break up in an ad hoc way in a moment. What are the habits you get into? That's such a good example, or your partner rushing. How could you, what do you know you need to do that could be more fruitful? How could you take a precept about that? So, how do you manage that in a more skillful way, a more useful, more productive, more helpful way? So could you take 2 precepts for this week? What is it in your life that you know is not in your own best interests? How can you get into that moment and start to change it? So when that moment comes and it's 12:30 and you're still doing your emails, you know that's not in your own best interests. You know by now you're already tired, you're dehydrated. That's the moment you need to get into and say, okay, so what I'm going to do for this week is I'm going to turn my computer off at 11. And that'll be a painful moment because you'll want to continue, because habit is like that. Human beings are habit creatures. As soon as you get into a habit, you want that habit to continue, even if that habit is negative. It takes this incredible strength to lean across and press the turn off notice. And do you notice that on Explorer it says, do you want to close this? And you think, no, I can't possibly want to. I mean, it's like it makes it harder, doesn't it? It pops up and says, do you really want to, because this is love, this is lots of things interesting. Do you really want to turn this off? And you have to actually insist, don't you? You have to say, yes, I do. So it doesn't even let you turn it off. It says, do you really? It sows that seed of doubt, because there might be some more nice things in here. It's only 12:30. So it takes this incredible effort of will to get into that moment, knowing what's in your own best interest and turning it off. When you do, actually, you know that, don't you? You know it. You don't need me to tell you. You don't need the Buddha to come down through 22.5 centuries to remind us how we deepen our life. And yet we do, yeah? So this week, try and think of 2 precepts, 2 things you can actually do, not sort of grandiose things like I'm going to be nice to people all week. You won't be able to manage it. Look for, trust me on that, unless you have a private income and almost no stress, and even then you probably won't be able to manage it. So what are the difficult points that show up for you, and how are you going to manage that? How are you going to act skillfully? How are you going to cultivate mindfulness of Dharmas? And how are you going to work perhaps in the pleasant things? But try and come up with 2 precepts. You already know probably what they are. And next week we're going to say what those precepts are. So a precept is something you can actually do. So I know that, what do I know? I can't think of anything. You know what they probably are. If you don't, ask your friends when you get home, what bad moods do I get into? And they'll soon tell you, yeah? Okay, so let's just turn into ad hoc. So make groups of 3 and see if you can come up with 2 precepts, and let's make them as specific as possible. No bland generalities like I'm going to love everybody.